Chapter 2. The Test in My Testimony. It was near midnight one Saturday night, and I was riding dirty in the shotgun seat of my friend's Lincoln Town car. The interstate we were driving on was all but empty except for the fine mist that kept the wipers working overtime. There were 2 carloads of us. I was in the tail car with my sister's boyfriend Mike, who was the driver, along with 2 other buddies in the back seat. The Lincoln Town car was somewhat inconspicuous. It was a dark gray 80s model that could just as easily fit in driving through a trailer park as it could pulling up in front of a country club. That was a good thing because our destination tonight was a trailer park. We weren't just on another joyride, though. Tonight we were driving for payback, for retribution. My older brother Bob was riding in the lead van driven by his best friend Jake. Their vehicle, on the other hand, was anything but tactical. Jake's dad owned a small drywall business, and one of the only vehicles on the road at the time that could fit multiple pieces of 4x8 sheetrock was a Ford Econoline van. It was big, it was white, and using it for a covert op like we were on that night was not the best idea. But it's the only option we had. The vehicles were shot through with nervous excitement. We rapped the song Strictly Business to the EPMD tape in the cassette deck. Just think while I sing, and to the brain structure. Boy, don't sleep on the E, 'cause something might rupture. It don't take time for me to blow your mind. It takes a second to wreck it because you're dumb and blind. So just lounge, 'cause you're an MC clown to join the circus. EPMD is in town. The late 80s innovative rap duo was one of our favorites that summer. The rest of the 30-minute ride, we made small talk and plotted our strategy. We were a caravan of careless teenagers looking for trouble. You would only have to go back a few weeks to figure out why we were doing this. We had just discovered incontrovertible evidence that my dad was cheating on my mom with another woman. Notwithstanding the fact my dad was involved in less than Christian behavior at the moment, he was still an awesome dad and had been living an honorable Christian life to that point. Perry, my dad, was the kind of guy that didn't know an enemy. People were naturally drawn to him and loved him. He was the dad that most kids would want as a father. He would just as soon hug and kiss you as he would scold you. He exemplified Christian kindness, joy, and industriousness. He was a man's man that worked with his hands. When he graduated high school in 1971 from Northville High, he got a job at Chatham Grocery Store in Northville, Michigan as a butcher. He was much more than a butcher, though. In addition to his more than 40-hour-a-week job, he also handcrafted and sold novelties, picnic tables, and mailboxes, and had a snowplowing business on the side during the winter. Hunting was his hobby, and our family room was his showcase. He hung taxidermy heads of deer, both whitetail and mule, an antelope, and a pheasant above the fireplace hearth. His ingenuity knew no bounds. He could sell trash for money, quite literally. In one of his many small business ventures, he reclaimed some balsa wood baskets from the dumpster at his grocery store. Apparently, the baskets had come to the grocery store from a wholesaler and were used to hold 2 containers of mushrooms that management considered superfluous and threw away. Their trash became my dad's treasure. He picked them from the dump, cleaned off the leftover vegetal matter, spray painted and stenciled a design on the side, and sold them for $10 apiece. It was nearly pure profit. My siblings and I still joke about his salesmanship of those, quote, country decor baskets, as he called them. One of his famous lines was, "Pardon me, ma'am, are you into country decor?" As far as church life was concerned, he was the type of member that any pastor would want. As a pastor myself now, I would take him over 10 solid men. We attended United Assembly of God Church in Plymouth, Michigan. It was a small church by most standards. The paid staff consisted of the senior pastor, Jack Williams, and a youth pastor, but the rest was just a large group of willing volunteer laymen and women. My dad was one of those laymen. He was one of the best. He held nearly every position at the church a layperson could. A Sunday school teacher, the Royal Ranger leader, think Christian Boy Scouts, and most memorably, he was the song leader. It still makes me giggle when I think about his very unique style of leading the congregation in song. With his light-up-the-room smile and all the charisma of a televangelist, he would get up behind the pulpit, raise his hands and arms out to the side as high as his shoulders like he was about to grab a pair of bicycle handlebars and ready himself. Once the congregation was set, and the piano and other accompanying instrumentation was struck up, he would begin waving his arms around in exaggerated figure eights to the tempo of the music like a real maestro. So pronounced was his style that as a toddler I would do my best little imitation of him as I sat in the car seat in the back of our Caprice Classic station wagon. It would tickle my mom to no end. I just remember deeply loving him when I was a little guy. I still do. He was also in the church choir and Southern Gospel Quartet. One night when my mom wasn't able to keep me at home for whatever reason, he took me to their practice. Some of the other dads brought their kids as well, so we stayed outside in the parking lot to play ball. Apparently, my pitches got a little too wild and I broke one of the stained glass windows in the sanctuary. He didn't blow up or even spank me. Granted, he wasn't happy about it, but he ended up taking me to the glass store so he could fix it himself and at the same time show his son how to take responsibility for his mistakes. That's the type of dad he was. He took responsibility to fix what was broken and took time to teach life lessons. I hoped and prayed that he would take responsibility for betraying us and fix me now, because I was breaking. We found out what he was doing because we acted on my mom's hunch. We did a stakeout like you'd see in the movies to see if her premonition was right. By this time, my dad had worked his way up from a butcher to managing the meat department. The small-town grocery store that he started in folded, and he was now with a large chain of Midwest grocery stores called Meijer. So we waited outside his job until he got off, and then tailed him to his girlfriend's trailer. The we, that is my family, consisted of me, my mom Debbie, my older sister Joy, and my older brother Bob. When we arrived at the trailer and saw his gray Chevy S10 pickup truck in her drive, it was more than any of us could bear. The reality of it was too much, too raw, too real. It was one thing to think about any of this even being a possibility for my dad, let alone experiencing it in real time. We sat there in devastated silence. Then my mom began to wail in agony. We were a Christian family, but were rocking and reeling under Satan's cruel blows. The same white Ford Econoline van we followed my dad in a few weeks earlier pulled into the same trailer park once again. The van quietly crept to a rolling stop on the side of the street and us in the town car behind them. We got out of the vehicles like stealthy Navy SEALs and snuck down the road to the trailer. Our premeditated plan was to vandalize this woman's trailer as payback for the pain she'd caused my family. So that's what we did. We trashed the landscaping, smashed her concrete bird bath, and leveled her lawn ornaments. The only exposure I'd ever had to alcohol prior to this was seeing my friends' dads drink and smelling beer in the empty beer cans and bottles us boys would dig out of the trash. Dumpster diving for bottles was one of our favorite, most rewarding pastimes. In Michigan, cans and bottles were money. 1 bottle equaled 10 cents and 10 bottles equals $1 and so on. That was enough for a pop and a few video games, which made it well worth the lengths we would go to find them. I kind of liked the smell of beer, but that's all I knew about it. I had come across a bottle of white wine earlier that night and brought it with me. And now, with a gaping emotional wound in my heart, I slammed some tobacco in between my lip and gums that I got from my sister's boyfriend, and I drank deeply from my first bottle of wine. That night, my life began to descend into a downward spiral that I could not stop. Without my dad in my life, I felt hopeless. I said to myself, nothing else matters anymore. I was only 14. The deed done, we fled without incident. It felt good at the moment, but in the long run it would prove a cut-rate cordial for our sin-ravaged hearts. A heavenward glance. I merely existed through my first 2 years of high school. I was completely self-absorbed and interested only in what made me happy. And what made me happy was skipping school, listening to hardcore music, be it grunge or hip-hop, being with my girlfriend, and using drugs. It seems like I skipped class more than I attended. That was at least true for my wrestling class. I failed out of it because I had more than 10 unexcused absences. I didn't break above a 2.0 grade point average for those 2 years, my worst being a 1.6, which is a D average. My grades reflected the turmoil in my soul. The days I decided not to go to class would be met early with alcohol. I was so desperate for a drink on occasion that I would retrieve half-empty bottles of stale beer we had thrown in the woods weeks earlier. It tasted skunked, as we called it, but the effect was still the same, and that's all that mattered. Whenever we partied, I felt I had to use. I did so to become more sociable and to repress my anger and emotions. But try as I might, I could not fight nature. Hardening my heart only proved to worsen my state. I was an emotional roller coaster. I could be rapturously happy one moment and seethingly angry the next. The traumatic events of my home life, compounded by drugs and made worse by illicit relationships with random girls, I became a wreck on the inside. My drug use progressed. It started with tobacco and alcohol, but I eventually ended up adding marijuana and LSD to the mix. Drug use was kind of fun at the beginning. I was used to an enjoyable high, slightly dissociated, giddy, and paranoid in a fun way. But all that started to become less frequent the more I used. During the summer between my sophomore and junior years, I was even starting to get scared when I used. Fun paranoia, if there is such a thing, turned into unnerving anxiety and terrible self-conscious insecurity. The chemicals in those substances were now revealing the real effects of the drugs. Satan had set his hook with the fun highs, but now he was reeling me into death and destruction, and I could do nothing to stop it. That is, until I went to Grandma's house.